Today I'm at the Russian embassy in Oslo, and I'm going to interview His Excellency Ambassador Teymuraz Ramishvili, who I've gotten to know pretty well during the last 3-4 years. And today we're going to have half an hour together and talk about what's important for him and for Russia and Norway and the rest of the world. So don't go away. What a privilege, Your Excellency, Ambassador Teymuraz Ramishvili, the Ambassador of the Russian Federation to Norway, that you received me again here in this beautiful fireplace room in the Russian embassy.
Thank you to you, because we don't have many meetings these days because of the famous coronavirus, new coronavirus. That's why I'm happy to see you after some of these limitations have been lifted and we can really talk as friends, as colleagues related to some of the important international phenomena in the world we talk on and discussed in the past, so it's really a privilege for me.
Thank you so much. Spasiba, to use one of my few, and you have your Norwegian words. Yeah. Sir, you have really opened up my understanding and appreciation of Russia and Russian culture during the 3.5 years since I met you first time here in Oslo. I think it was at the Romanian embassy. And I've come to understand the role of a diplomat as being one who really opens up, and not just to the politics of your nation, but actually to the whole people and the whole culture of your nation.
You are speaking in a very traditional way.
Okay.
Some probably 100 years ago, only diplomats could really represent their nations. Nowadays, it's a bit exaggeration because of not only of internet, but books, newspapers, whatever, even before internet era. So, of course, we knew a lot about each other, especially in a very small Europe. But definitely in some of the countries, like Norway, with a small population, big territory but small population, still, and Norway, because of the probably short sovereign history in modern times, is still very attentive to the official representation of foreign states. That is why probably there is some meaning in what you are saying. Plus in the small countries and the small cities like Oslo, you are recognizable. Because I remember after first interview, I stopped. I was driving myself. I stopped on some street, allowing people to cross the street. And someone said, "Are you the one I know?" I said, "What do you mean? Are you the Russian ambassador? I saw you on TV." I said, "Yeah, well, you're correct. Continue the same way." It was middle-aged Norwegian. So, well, I tell you, sometimes you like the idea to be a part of the society where you are as a foreigner, who can only observe, take note, fix, and report. Sometimes it's funny to find yourself, which says about, by the way, a very democratic Norwegian soil and soul. I mean. Not bad.
Exactly.
Not bad, yeah.
Sir, You are actually of Georgian heritage. Your name reflects Georgian culture rather than Russian. How is that?
Well, Georgia was part of the Soviet Union, and before Soviet Union for nearly 200 years part of the Russian Empire. And that is why, I mean, everyone was equal. Not only 15 republics, but also some, in addition, 100 ethnic groups, big ethnic groups, which had, were able to preserve their languages and even to open schools and universities. So that is why it was a privilege to go to Moscow and to get privileged education, especially that foreign studies definitely were much more, let's say, the quality of education was much better in Moscow related to foreign studies, foreign languages, and I graduated from the Foreign Studies University, international law. So it was normal not only for me, I had many Uzbeks, Tajiks, Turkmens, Azerbaijanis, Armenians, I don't know, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and others who were studying and getting many diplomats and some even Minister of Foreign Affairs in the former Soviet republics, now independent states, graduated from the same university. So it's normal. I'm not on a very, let's say, exceptional list.
Now, you're a Russian citizen, obviously, but do you still have family in the Republic of Georgia?
Yeah, unfortunately my parents passed away, my grandmothers, my grandfathers, but still my, God bless, my brother with his family lives in Georgia, Tbilisi. You know, for my generation, I don't know, I'm sure the younger generation thinks different, but for me, born in the big empire, big state, was even psychologically very difficult to imagine. Then I can represent a small state, but it's only psychological. That is why for me there was no really a challenge. Of course, psychologically we're not in our shoes as far as the big state which collapsed very soon. And many people, by the way, committed suicide, who in principle were of very liberal opinions, but they didn't think that some processes which had taken place in the Soviet Union would pass the way to the dismantling, the dissolution of the state. So, especially those who have been of very liberal views relating to different ethnicities and who were demanding for more freedom for ethnic groups. So they considered that they failed, because, but it happens in our history. Yeah.
Now, you've been the full-fledged ambassador for the Russian Federation in South Korea, in Denmark, and Norway. Do you grow attached to the nations when you live there for like 4 years in each nation?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Of course.
Now, we have a pretty large viewership in Denmark. So what do you like best, Denmark or Norway?
Oh, well, difficult. Well, then the answer will be South Korea. No, the matter is that probably it doesn't make a good service to me. I try to be very objective, not necessarily logical, but because sometimes the way you are received by the host country sometimes creates a bad service. saying, well, if you are received well, if everyone smiles at you, then you're at home. Not necessarily. Not necessarily, but time had changed. When I was in Denmark and previously in South Korea, there were different period in international situation. When I came to Norway, it was totally different. It was period already sanctions, over 2 years of sanctions and Russian counter-sanctions, and many discussion about this new complication, new Cold War.
You're talking about the Crimean crisis?
Yeah. So totally different situation. That's why comparing all these things, I wouldn't say I don't feel in Norway, let's say, abandoned or not connected with the processes taking place here. And Denmark was different. I liked very much Denmark. People very open-minded, inviting the foreign guests much often than in Norway to their houses. Probably one of the differences which I felt. Very flat geographically,
very flat, yes.
but not flat psychologically.
Yeah.
So different. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting you allude to the sanctions and the tense situation between Russia and some parts of the Western world. Norway, of course, is a pretty homogeneous society and quite controlled in a sense. And there seems to have been a pretty strong one-sided opinion about the Crimean crisis. But it was interesting. About a year ago, in 2019, I was at the mall and I met your ministry counselor, Andrei Koselnikov. And of course, he speaks impeccably Norwegian. And we were discussing the Crimean crisis. And then suddenly, behind me, I discovered the former Prime Minister of Norway, Kåre Willoch. So I said to him, hey, what do you think about the Crimean crisis? And Mr. Willoch, he speaks his own mind. And he said, I think Norway should lift the sanctions against Russia. And he brought in other views of this. So there are different views in Norway as well.
Well, yes, there are. We know that there are different views in Norway, but you have your own parliamentary political system. In fact, that not political parties but coalitions are winning or losing, very often being representing the minority. But anyway, this is a functioning democratic system which exists, and I let's say esteem this system. The government and the parliament decided in particular way, so I esteem this one. I disagree, probably totally, but telling the Norwegians that this is against their interests would be very primitive and simplistic. They have to decide themselves. Well, if I am asked, I'm not a propagandist, I'm a diplomat. So when asked, I can explain, trying to urge that the position of Russia is not totally logical and based including not only on realities, facts, history, but also on law. And then every time to tell the petty pedestrian, well, the history of international relations. I'm not sure many Norwegians or even Russians will listen to me. To tell the rest of the world that it's at a biased position, that someone was applauding to the separatist movement in Chechnya, or somewhere else, but criticizing similar in the Ukraine, in the former Ukraine, or somewhere else. So that is why, or Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia. So, but we have a situation we are facing. I mean, we are pragmatic people. There are sanctions against Russia and partial counter-sanctions of Russia against those who introduced these sanctions against Russia. It definitely affected very much Russian-Norwegian, Norwegian-Russian trade, in particular Norwegian export to Russia. It was cut by 6 times, 8 times? 6 times the Norwegian export to Russia diminished. Russian export to Norway less, mainly because of the difference of prices, because the prices diminished for most of the goods Russia was exporting before the sanctions. By the way, with Ukraine, we still call Ukraine brotherly Ukraine. Ukraine meaning people. The Russian-Ukrainian trade before Crimea events, before the coup in Kiev, as we call it, was over $60 billion. Wow. Now it is less than 1/3.
Wow. Interesting.
So it's up to people to decide.
Exactly. Now, sir, when I met you first time, what intrigued me was your position on family policies. Now, I'm not going to ask you about that, but that definitely opened up my eyes and my mind to understand and appreciate what is going on in Russia in favor of family policies. But you also introduced me to much more of the Russian Orthodox Church and faith. And that has really impacted me. I've become, developed a good relationship to the Russian Orthodox priest in Oslo, etc. Now, how important is faith in the present-day Russia?
Well, it's not an easy question, because I'm not involved very deep in internal processes in Russia, because you have to look at the different parts of Russia. In some, in particular, that it's a multi-ethnic society. So if you go to Tatarstan, then it's half population, half Muslim, half Christian.
Yes.
Orthodox Christian, plus some Germans of German origin people, Catholics or Protestants. So it's not that easy. But what happened after 89, 90, so before the Soviet Union was had collapsed, was definitely the opening up again. The different events or different phenomena in the world, because Russia and the Soviet Union before, for nearly 80 years, was, out of the world processes in some respects. So it was a superpower. But internal development was very, let's say, déjà fait, as the French say, behind the schedule. That is why religion was something which was officially not prohibited but not welcomed by the Communist Party. The Communist Party was the only political force in the society, and definitely people by definition are not happy with any limitations or prohibitions. So the active popularity of religion in general. When I speak about religion, it's mainly, of course, the major religions, world religions, because it's at some point all prohibition, all limitations stopped, and people wanted to know. Plus, the younger generation was interested because they were not admitted to the 1,000 years history of its own, of Russia itself. Because definitely the development of Russia, major development of Russia, or European, let's say, Europeization of Russia started since the majority of population was admitted to Christian religion.
Exactly. Now, it fascinates me that a state under the Soviet Union, people that were not encouraged to enter into religious activity, so largely turned to it at the end of the Soviet Union. So faith must have been there all along.
Protest is a normal human protest.
Yeah.
It's like in this famous legend when you are, when запретный плод, the forbidden fruit, it is the same.
Yeah.
If I may say, to simplify
Yeah.
the whole situation.
Yeah.
Everything forbidden is always something people want to gather. They probably don't know if they need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I understand what you had meant. That, but in Russia, definitely, situation is different from the most of European states. When you can see that most of the churches are closing down or sold out or being used more for cultural or restaurant or type of events. In Russia, is not. Nearly every day, a new church is renovated. New church is constructed, or the old one is renovated.
That's interesting.
Because Russian tradition, it's mostly the same fashion was in most of Europe, irrespective who were Protestant, who were Catholic, or Orthodoxy. Nearly every one or two villages had its own church. The same was in Russia.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands were destructed, ruined during the Soviet period.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a long way to go.
Yeah.
So that is why there's a new interest to religion and to the church is something Russian people still, let's say, following this way. Some are trying to know more about it. Some during these difficulties in the 90s were looking for some rescue, for some help from someone, psychologically mainly, not but materially as well. Because of it, even some non-traditional religious groups also found themselves active in Russia, some successful, some not successful.
I notice one of the movements that I've had good relationships with in Scandinavia, the Word of Life Church in Uppsala, they have a big sister church in Moscow called Word of Life Moscow. And I heard an interview on our channel actually with the pastor, and he said that they had such good conditions for their church, their Pentecostal church in Moscow and all over Russia. So I thought that was very encouraging to hear.
Russian people is still endeavoring these freedoms they've got just 25 years ago back.
Yeah.
and it will take some time until we will be able to say to what extent this belief is viable,
Exactly.
is important for them. Probably it will go the same trends as in Europe, or the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Russia being such an old cultured nation, developments will obviously take time. Of course, I know I have friends who don't agree on Russian policies towards church minorities, but I'm encouraged by the ones who are happy with things. So I think it's good to talk about that as well.
I was among very few who drafted first Russian law on religious freedom.
Yeah.
And it so happened that because I was the only one who was speaking languages, foreign languages, and the press was very active, especially foreign Western press. Then I was quite happy to tell the press that what kind of principle we selected to draft the law. And you know that the Russian law on freedom of religion is based on the so-called historic religious,
Exactly.
yeah, which are Christianity, Orthodoxy, Islam, Judaism,
Yeah.
and Buddhism.
Yes. Exactly.
So Buddhism is a traditional. So that traditional in Russia means over 100 years old.
Exactly.
So
a
following the British way.
A Pentecostal church would barely be that.
Well, it's a part of Christianity. Yeah.
Of course, of course. Now, how do you see your role the next few months? Do you think you'll be able to continue in Norway? Because I, for one, have been so blessed by you. You're the one who introduced me to the Israeli ambassador, and you've introduced me to many people.
I hope I will stay for some time more in Norway, but I'm approaching already the age when it's time to retire and to devote to time to more reading. But definitely it's time to give, some to pave some way for younger generation.
Yeah.
For otherwise, it will be a kind of stalemate in Russia, in the world. So I would be happy to do it.
Well, certainly I thank you again, Your Excellency Ambassador Teymuraz Ramishvili, for receiving me and my crew today. And may I wish you God's richest blessing in every way for your family and your grandchildren and all that you endeavor. Thank you. Spasiba.
Thank you very much, Mr. Torp. Well, I know, you know that I have very high esteem of you, and I was happy that it was me to introduce you to Russian embassy, and so in spite of probably different political views, but we have many things, I think, which unite us.
Yes.
As individuals, as human beings, as Europeans, and as Christians.
Yes.
So that's why my best wishes to those who hear and listen to this interview. I will be happy to continue this new experience for me. So it was really privilege to talk to you.
Spasiba.
Yeah.
Spasiba.
Thank you very much.